Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is the Far From Home podcast, where we're asking the big questions about life abroad, one journey at a time. And today, my very special guest is Mr. Douglas Rooney. So, Douglas, I'd like the listeners to. I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Really looking forward to this conversation. Let's start by getting to know you. Could you please introduce yourself to the listeners? Who is Douglas Rooney?
Sure. So I'm Douglas Rooney. I'm originally from a small town in Scotland, but I moved to China in 2018, just the end of 2018, where I started working at a university in Beijing, where I teach currently in the communications department. And also in my spare time, I guess, I also produce some content about China. So I write for a Substack called China Up Close, and I also produce a small YouTube channel called Sino Zero, where I've started posting stuff about my life in China, about Chinese history, stuff like that.
Yeah, cool. Can I ask which small town in Scotland?
Armadale, if you know it, it's pretty close to Edinburgh. You might have heard of it if you're a big David Tennant fan. His hometown is a place called Bathgate, which is one town over from where I am. So I have the same accent as David Tennant.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I love David Tennant, especially as the Purple Man in Jessica Jones. I thought he was terrifying. So in the notes you told me you moved from Scotland to China in 2018. What first brought you over to China? What pushed you out of Scotland, let's say? What were your expectations? What were you looking for?
Well, I was looking for a job, mostly. So the Scotland 2018, I was kind of like between jobs. I just moved back up from England. I was staying with my parents, and this job came up in Beijing, and I decided to apply for it. Originally, my idea was I would be here for 8 months, 9 months, which is how long the contract was for. And then I would come back home and I would be able to dine out on stories about coming to China and living in Beijing for a bit. But by the end of the 8, 9 months, I decided to stay on. And yeah, so I've been here ever since.
Yeah, cool. When you say the job came up, were you actively looking for the job? Did someone reach out to you? Because I think some people think of like, when we move abroad, it's quite, oh yeah, just jumped abroad. But for some people, it's quite a big
Oh,
decision.
sure.
Could you
For
could you
me,
explain how that
for
came
me, it
about?
was Yeah, for me, it wasn't a big decision at all, actually. If anything, I didn't realize the decision I was making at the time was quite as big as it was. So I was sitting in my parents' house and I was scrolling around looking for jobs on like Indeed. And I think I was doing a TEFL qualification online at the time, thinking, well, maybe I'll go abroad, maybe I'll teach, tutor, something like that. And I saw this job that was looking originally. I wasn't doing the job I'm doing just now. Originally, it was a job teaching like a history course in a Chinese high school, and I have a master's in history. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll just apply for this. I'll see if they get back to me. They got back to me. They offered me the job, and I was like, I'm literally like the town I'm from in Scotland is like post-industrial. We used to have 3, 4 factories. There's now no jobs. There's nothing to do. I hated growing up there. So when someone was like, "Hey, you want to come to China for 8 months?" Like it wasn't a big decision. I was like, "What? I can get out of here? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll go. Whatever." Yeah. So for some people, it's a massive decision. For me, I think I was just happy to leave my parents' back room for a little bit. Honestly.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I was writing something on my Substack this week about reflection on the opportunity of being a TEFL teacher, and I did have the thought
Mm.
that most people I've met who did the TEFL qualification, they are mostly from working class backgrounds. There are famous people like I think Jeremy Hunt, the British politician who taught TEFL in Japan, but it is mostly a working class career, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure. Because I think if you are, yeah, no, 100%. Because I think it is. Um, it's a very unprestigious job, I think. So I think if you are someone who has a university education but couldn't get on the ladder in Britain, I think it's quite common for you or it's more common for you than if you were a middle class person with more access to that kind of career ladder, to jump abroad and see if you can find something. I think because the British class system, right, is still quite rigid in Britain, but outside Britain, you can sometimes get away with being like a working class guy at a university a little bit more easily, I think, than sometimes you can in the UK.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's the hypothesis I came to. if you go into like a good graduate
Mm,
scheme, if you have like family who have connections and wealth, yeah, I think you're much more likely to actually stay in the UK. But if you're, yeah, for me, I was just bartending and there wasn't really a lot of options. But I knew pretty early on I wanted to leave the country, so I googled how to leave the UK with an English degree. And obviously, teaching English came up. Yeah, the
yeah.
barrier to entry is quite low. I think that makes it a lot more accessible for working class people. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's an interesting thought, an interesting thing I realized. So let's also talk about love in a new country. So you mentioned you met your husband within the first week of China. Could you please
Yeah.
explain how it began, what happened, how you met, and how it developed?
So when I landed in Beijing, I had never been to Asia before. I spoke no Chinese. I knew no one in the city, and so I was like, "Well, how do you meet people, right? How do you meet people?" Because I was working at the time. Everyone at my job, some of them spoke a little bit of English, but not very much. I was really the only foreigner there. I was the only person. The Chinese people couldn't speak very much English, so I couldn't really make friends at work. I was like, "How do I make friends?" And I was like, dating, right? Dating is how you make friends. That's how you meet people. So I got on Tinder and I matched with my now husband and we met. I think I landed in the country on the Monday. We met on the Thursday, I think. So less than a week. And I got my second date because we had our date. I'd come straight from work and I was like, my birthday was on the Saturday. And at the end of the day, I turned to him and I was like, "Oh, I'm a foreigner. I'm all alone in China. I have no one to celebrate my birthday with. Would you come and celebrate with me?" And he took pity on me and came along and took me out for my birthday on the Saturday. So that's how I got my second second date.
But well, I've been waiting for someone to go to Shanghai Disneyland with me, but sadly, no one has taken pity on me. So that doesn't work for me. But yeah, interesting. So obviously, yeah, that's quite moving quite somewhat well. For sick best, no, let's not say that. Let's fast forward. So that was a long time ago. Since
Mm.
then, I guess you've experienced international marriage, dating when your first languages are different, different family dynamics than we typically experience back home. I'd imagine there's some paperwork involved. So what's been the biggest challenges of making that relationship work?
I guess the two biggest challenges is initially when I started dating my now husband. So he comes from not originally Beijing. He comes from the south of China in Hunan, quite a rural area, quite a conservative area. And his family's pretty big. For a Chinese family, definitely. So he's a minority in China. So they were never affected by the one child policy. So he has this big extended family,
Mm.
none of whom were particularly comfortable with him being in one, a same-sex relationship, and two, being in a relationship with a foreigner. And so that conservatism was a little bit of a barrier because even by the time we were getting married, none of his family really wanted to show up. Since we've been married, they kind of come around the corner, so a happy ending. Like last Chinese New Year, we spent it with his mum, for example. So she's made big roads in that direction. But initially, that was really quite a bit of a struggle, I think. I've always been lucky that my family's always been very accepting of me, and so that wasn't so much a problem. And they were really happy and really accommodating with Dan, with my husband. And the biggest struggle in it was two biggest struggles, I would say. The first was my accent has become very presentable because I've been living outside Scotland for years and years and years, right? But my family have lived in the same town basically for generations. They are incomprehensible, even to English speakers, right? English people will come up and meet my family and be like, so my husband meeting them for the first time, and even now sometimes struggles a little bit with understanding what they're saying. The second problem is if you want to talk about a cultural difference. I'm sure it's the same where you're from, right? But where I'm from, Thatcher is kind of a dirty word, right? It's old mining area, old industrial area. My family do not like Margaret Thatcher, right? There's a real. My dad was out with the miners' strike and all that kind of stuff. And so the first time Dan, my husband, met my family, I was like, he had told me he wanted to buy a biography of Margaret Thatcher for his sister because she's a strong woman, good role model. And I was like, don't tell my family that. Please don't tell my family that. But anyway, we're at dinner and my mom is like, hey, is there anything you want to do in the UK? And he's like, yeah, I really want to buy a biography of Margaret Thatcher. He was like, why? And he was like, oh, I want to give it to my sister as a great role model for women. And the room goes silent. Everyone just kind of looking at their plates. And then my mum looks up after a moment and says, to tell her what not to do. Is that why you want to give it to? So talking about like these cultural ones, and on my side there was a little bit of cultural difference, but on the other there was a bit for Dan, a bit of a learning curve about working class Scottish culture, I guess. But yeah, those were the main cultural differences, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of get that. There's times where I feel like people in Asia where I've lived, they mention the royal family with how many big headlines there's been over recent years with the death of the Queen and Meghan Markle, and they're really surprised with my very, let's say, hot takes against them. They're like, whoa, you really have some strong feelings about this.
I I made a I
Yeah,
made
they're
a I
just
made a
yeah,
mistake in a
that's
class
not good.
once. Well, I made a mistake in a class once where my student was like, "In the UK, is the royal family popular?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think the majority of British people generally quite like the royal family, right?" And they took that as a sign that I personally loved the royal family. So for the rest of that semester, they would be like, if they had to do a presentation in my communication class, they would do it about how they loved Meghan Markle or something like that. And I would be like, why is this happening? And it was because I accidentally, like you, I have, let's say, different views about the royal family than most people back home. But yeah, sometimes there's an assumption, right?
Yeah, yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, but back to your relationship, it's really cool that despite the challenges, you've persevered and you're still together and you face them together.
Mm.
So yeah, on the flip side of going from the most challenging things, let's say what surprised you the most about, let's say, the joys or what you've learned about building a life with someone who's from a totally different culture.
I think, I think like the great thing about dating someone from a different culture is it gives you, I don't want to say ownership, but access to this culture that you otherwise would never have. Like, I don't want to say I am part of dance culture, but certainly I feel like more of a belonging to a lot of Chinese culture than I think I otherwise would. So when I'm celebrating Chinese New Year with his
Mm,
family, it feels like I'm part of the family now. And so when we're taking part in these traditions, it feels like very much I'm taking part in a actual Chinese family's tradition year after year after year. And I think him the same. He certainly has more of a connection to Scotland sometimes than even I do. So we have in the house always a collection of Scottish malt whiskies, and that's mostly his doing, right? He likes there to be a collection of Scottish malt whiskies in the house, so when guests come, he can give them because it's a big part of Scottish culture, right? And so I think like a really fun part of dating someone from another culture is you do get access to this, yeah, this other culture, this intimate access to another culture that no matter how long you stayed in China, right, you would never get that access in the same way as like you're part of someone's family and they're letting you into the
mm.
house.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I imagine as a married man, your experience is very different to mine as a single man. But I'm really curious, what kind of whiskey does he have on the shelf? Are we talking like Lafroig?
It, yeah, so Dan doesn't really like Lefroy because Dan isn't a big fan of the very peaty ones. So we tend to get a lot of Speyside, Talisker. We have quite a lot of Talisker usually we keep in. Um, we have a lot of blended whiskies. So when friends come to the house, they don't always want Chinese friends don't always want like just a straight whiskey or a whiskey with ice. But it hurts my soul if they're to add like Coke to a Talisker. So I have a lot of blends
Yes.
in. So if they're like, "Oh, I would like to mix it," I'm like, "Oh, well, I've got this famous grouse for you. Would you like to use that?" Stuff like that. But yeah, so it's fun, right? So we've become known as this like almost Scottish couple, I guess.
Yeah, that's quite nice. Yeah, I don't drink
Yeah,
alcohol anymore, but I used to bartend. I go heavily into my whiskeys and my rums. But yeah, I
yeah.
think they're a good way of bringing people together.
Oh,
Definitely.
certainly.
But yeah, so I want to move on next to moving away from your relationship to talking about your approach to your other work in China. So you've
Mm,
obviously written on your Substack some really interesting articles about life in China. You made some YouTube videos on your YouTube channel, and you discuss how living in China, well, yeah, I guess what you've learned and how it's changed your view of the world living in China.
mm.
So yeah, I saw you had some decent conversations with, I think I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It's Li Jingjing on China Up Close. Um, so yeah, I just consider myself a teacher and someone who likes to tweet and post and share things I like in China. How did you get involved in having a conversation like that online?
Well, so I think Uh, the process. So we were talking about like interesting things that happens when you move abroad. One of the things that happened to me was it. really fundamentally changed my relationship politically with the United Kingdom and with the West more generally. I think like coming to China was a bit of a radicalizing moment for me in many ways. And so since coming here in 2018 and now, a lot of my political views have changed quite radically, I think. And so as part of that, I kind of tried to explore more about China, not just the cultural side, but also kind of the political side, try and understand how the country works. And I've always found that a good way to force yourself to learn something is to try and produce something, whether that is an article, a book, a YouTube video, a podcast. It kind of forces you to sit down and read. And so I started writing on my Substack and writing
Mm.
for Jing's Substack as well. Mostly as just like a way to justify to myself the amount of time I was spending reading about China and about politics and about geopolitics and stuff like that. And then from that, Jing wanted me on her podcast. I wrote an article for her maybe last year, kind of comparing local government in the UK to my experience of local government in China and why I thought the Chinese model worked better than the British model. And she got me on her podcast initially to just talk about that. And then a few months ago, we were on again to talk a bit more in depth about the experience of being a foreigner in China and things like that. So I got access to her just because I wanted an outlet to write for. And I happened to meet her just at the moment where she was about to launch her Substack, which was really good. So it was kind of like an affinity. I was looking for somewhere to write, and she was looking for someone to write on her Substack. And so it was like a meeting of two people who were in the right place at the right time. And from that, we kind of developed a working relationship and then kind of a friendship.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. But I really like the idea that you've made connections by building something. That's something I'm trying to explore lately with this podcast and my own Substack.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like the process of making something.
Mm.
I'm one of those people who thinks they're very clever. But when you're forced to put down your ideas in a format, it really makes you question your own ideas. Um, yeah, there's a few like for me when I think of sharing my opinion or developing an opinion, there's lots of little like mindset hacks I try and use. So for me, my favorite is uh, if you can't think of the best reason against your own argument, you probably haven't thought about it enough. I'm curious when you're producing something, do you have like any mindset hacks like that that force you to challenge yourself and develop your opinion further?
So I think one of the things I often do, especially in my writing, is I'm kind of writing to an earlier version of myself often. And if you keep that in mind, a lot of my how I structure articles make a lot of sense, I think. So as I say, like if you meet me in 2015, 2016, I have very different political opinions. For example, I'm a much bigger fan of the royal family than I would be today, for example. I was much more conservative in my political opinions. I'm much more willing to trust the party line when it comes to what the UK government is saying about various things and things like that. I never voted Conservative, but certainly I would be like maybe on the right of the Labour Party, like Lib Dem curious, that kind of guy. And so a lot of the time when I'm
Mm.
writing, it's kind of like there's a earlier version of myself in my mind about like if I was me from 10 years ago, how would you structure an article to try and get through to that guy? And so I do think that when I look at the comments, I think most of my audience are actually quite left wing, but I guess the imagined audience in my head is a kind of like liberal, centrist, maybe Labour right guy that I was 10 years ago, and writing for him, trying to say, hey, maybe have you thought about these things? Maybe you could come a little bit over with us and kind of reconsider your viewpoint.
Mm. Yeah, I think because like people of our age and our generation, we've lived through I think it was 14 years of a conservative government. So I think
Yeah.
most people who are like mid 30s, let's say, I think it feels our politics be quite fixed for probably a
Mm.
decade, experiencing that kind of government. But yeah, now Labour have come in. I feel like my own politics is changing. Um, people often joke about you get more right wing as you get older. I wouldn't go that far, but I'm definitely a lot more cynical about parties that I thought would serve me better. Yeah, I think that's quite normal as you throughout your life, your politics will change. Um,
100%. Yeah, I
but
remember
yeah,
having
uh,
conversations with my dad who was like, "Oh, I just don't know who there is to vote for." And as a younger person, I was like, "Oh, there's always something to vote for." And now, as I'm into my 30s, I'm like, "Who am I going to vote for? I don't know. I don't really
yeah,
like any of them."
I've reached that point.
Yeah.
I don't believe anything they say anymore. I don't like the way they conduct
Oh, yeah.
themselves.
Mhm.
I don't think they're interested in the interest of the people. But yeah, coming. I often joke nothing radicalizes a British person more than traveling to China and taking a train. When you come to China and just see like everything works, it's by no means everyone in China is perfect, everyone is happy. But yeah, but things get done and things work, and there are systems in place. And compared to the UK, where
Oh,
we've
sure.
had very little development, it's
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
it's really hard to rest on your mind, balance on your mind. But
Well,
yeah, I want to bring it back to
British
China.
people accessing the internet in
So we both,
China, where you're like, oh, I have 5G, I can access the internet in the subway. Like, that's insane. Right?
yeah, yeah. Listen, people often joke like, China's living in like 2050. Well, I think I've seen this reframing lately. Well, actually, China's living in 2025, and Britain is stuck in the early 2000s. Um, which is quite a sad thought. Yeah, because we want to see the UK do well, but
Yeah.
yeah. So bring it back to China. We both spent years now living in China. So from your point of view, what do you think people outside of China consistently get wrong about what life is like inside China?
So I think, in my experience, one of the reasons that visiting China can be so radicalizing for not just Europeans but Westerners more general is I think the general impression of China is that it is still a developing country, which of course it is. It's a developing country, but in our minds, what that means is that we're going to see a country that is poorer than the one we came from. We're going to see one where things aren't working as much as we came from, right? I think we still have this idea of a developing country being somewhere where we go and the streets are unclean and there's corruption everywhere and stuff like that. It's a police state with cameras and stuff like that. And I think when you come to China, it's obviously still developing. You can really see that, especially when you go into smaller cities or the countryside. But when people arrive in the big cities, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, or even when you get on the high speed railway, or even when you go to the countryside, honestly, it's much, much more developed in many ways than the places we left. So you pointed out the train, going on the train and sitting there on your high speed train that's going 300 kilometers an hour. There's nothing really comparable to the UK, or 5G network, or everyone has their phone and they can scan and they can pay, or the speed of automation, right? We're seeing self driving cars and you can do everything online and paperless society, things like that. I think it can be so radicalizing because our image of China is this like grey developing country. And then you arrive here and it's clean, it's bright, it's Beijing is much greener than I was expecting. I don't know what you were expecting when you came to China,
Mm,
but I was expecting grey, I was expecting smog, I was expecting like commie tower blocks. And I arrived and I saw like there are parks, all the streets have trees lining them, stuff like that. Um, and I think, yeah, that radicalizing moment is I don't know where we get it from, but like even like when family have visited me and they've got off the plane and have went, oh, it's much nicer than I thought it would be. And it's like, well, why did
mm,
we as British people, as Westerners, think it wouldn't be nice? Like it's not like China's hiding its infrastructure. It's not like it's hiding its clean streets or its functioning cities, right? So yeah, so I think
mm,
there's this image we have in China that's very, very, very poor. It's kind of stuck in the 1980s almost. And so when we arrive and we see that it is updating, and not just that, that even when you go to poor areas like the countryside, okay, it's very poor, it's still a developing country, but you can feel that there is plans to make it better. And I think that also can be
mm.
radicalizing because where in the UK do you go where it feels like there's plans to be making it better, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so I think that is the big shock when you come to China, right? And I think that's why people get radicalized or people have I don't know like um people leave China raving about it sometimes, right? Being super enthusiastic, and I honestly think it's because they came expecting 1980s China and they came here and it's 2020s China.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. One thought I've had is, yeah, I feel like when you live here long enough, you see things improve in many different ways, even just the apps becoming more accessible to foreigners. Just little things like that. Whereas after, yeah, being British, there's not one thing that comes to mind that I think, oh yeah, that's improved. Um, which is, yeah, even my favorite thing, like football. The Premier League is one of the best things about the UK, but even I feel that's got worse from a fan experience. I used to love going to music festivals, and now I just think they're grossly overpriced and not the same. Um, so yeah, it's a shame. There's not much that comes to mind when I think of what's improved in the UK.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. Right, it does feel like yeah, even when I go back home, it's always sad to me because I go back home And it feels like my hometown has the same problems it had when I left, but all of the problems got a little bit worse. The potholes are a bit bigger. There's less to do. There's less jobs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally get it. Sorry, Douglas, I'm just gonna have to stop recording. My laptop is saying
I know.
the connection is not good. So I'm just gonna stop it and start again. So yeah, sorry about that. Just had to take a quick break. Connection issues. I'm still learning how to run a podcast. But yeah, Douglas and me were just making some really like a nice chat about how this is therapy for British people who've been scarred by, let's say, a lack of hope in the UK and coming to China. But yeah, I've been looking through your work. There's a video on like panda history.
Mm.
I've always been interested in geopolitics myself. But yeah, I was looking through your stuff. I feel like you've got range. You talk about a lot of interesting topics. So I'm curious, as someone who started being creative themselves, what keeps your curiosity engine running after all these years abroad? You don't want to just put your feet up, enjoy happily married life, progress nicely to work, and enjoy your holidays. What's keeping you curious and what's keeping you creative?
Well, I think I kind of like need to be. So I guess I could say like I need to be creative to keep a happy marriage. And what I mean by that is if I wasn't writing articles on Substack or producing YouTube videos, I would have to be telling my husband about all of the interesting facts I've learned. And there's a real limit to how much he's willing to listen to that. So when I storm into the room and go, "You'll never guess what I've just learned about," it's a lot of the time he'll be like, please don't tell me. I don't want to know. So part of the creative process is just giving me an outlet for like opinions I have or thoughts I've had or stuff I've discovered, right? So the panda video was just because I was just like researching a bunch about like panda diplomacy and the history of panda diplomacy, and I had all these facts about pandas in my head, and I was like, "What do you do with that?" So you're like, "Well, you either write about it or you make a video about it, right? Those are your options." Um, I have another one on there about the history of Mormonism in China. Again, it's because I stumbled across an article about Mormonism in China, and I wanted to know more. And then I learned way too much about Mormonism in China. And then I was like, well, what do? I can't tell my friends about this. They'll think I'm insane. What if I make a video? And then that somehow legitimizes my weird obsession about this micro topic. But also, I think it's just important to be creative, right? I think for me at least, being creative makes me feel like I'm being productive in a way that my work doesn't. It makes me feel like I'm doing something for the soul, if you like. Maybe that's a little bit too grand to talk about it, but there's something nice about sitting down and researching a topic and then thinking about how you're going to create all these information together and stitch it together and create something that our audience hopefully enjoys. I like that process. I think it's a really nice process. And then when you get people coming back to you, as sometimes happens, and people will be like, "Oh, I really liked your work." Hopefully, that's what they like, right? It feels really nice. You're like, "Yeah, I found an audience." But even if you don't find an audience, I think just the act of creating, it's just good for you. It's good for me, good for the soul.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I'm really enjoying it myself. But yeah, I totally relate to like you found something really interesting, you want to talk about it, but your friends are obviously not very interested. And yes, for lack of yeah, sometimes you're trauma dumping on them. Sometimes yeah, you're just spewing all these facts and opinions you learned that it's like we don't care. So yeah, that's why I'm trying to build something online. Hopefully, meet more people who I can talk about things I want to talk about with. That's I totally get that. But yeah, I guess my next question would be, uh, so yeah, you've got range. You're into like articles, books, podcasts, deep reads. What are you currently thinking about now, or is there something you want to explore next? Is there a topic that's really caught your eye?
Yes, I have got really deep into. So tomorrow, actually, I'm going on a little bit of a trip to a town in the Shandong coast called Weihai, and so one of the reasons I want to go there is I want to escape the Beijing heat, right? I want to go to the seaside, but also Weihai has an interesting history because between 1898 and 1930, it was a British colony. It was the Hong Kong of the North, and I have not met a single person who knows that fact. Um, and so I want to go there and I want to see, well, what's left of the British Empire in this little forgotten town. So I've been reading obsessively like old like 1910s accounts of what life was like in British colonial Weihai in this tiny little forgotten colony. And so I've become like a little bit hyper obsessed about this, reading books written in the 1910s about this little colony. And so I'm really excited to go there because it's given me this excuse to go and find out. And the other thing I really like is I'm going to try and make a video about it. And this is what I like about my YouTube and my Twitter and my articles is I feel sometimes it gives me an excuse to go and do something I would really like to do anyway. So I think producing a video, I
Mm,
feel like I can justify to myself the expense of buying a train ticket, getting a hotel, touring the city, because I'm like, it's fine. I'm making a video. I'm making content. Whereas that's something I really want to do anyway. And I think if I didn't have that creative outlet, I would maybe go, do I really want to? It's a couple of days. So yeah, so this is what I'm focused on, and it's the kind of thing I love. It's giving myself license to do the thing that I wanted to do all along.
nice. Yeah, I first taught in China 10 years ago for 6 months on a TEFL program. And some of the people on the same program, they were placed in Weihai. So I'm familiar with it. There's a nice beach. I think I'll have a really nice time. I've heard very good things. Are you still with
Yeah,
me? Three, two, one.
yeah. Sorry, you froze for a little bit.
Yeah, good to check in. No problem. Sorry about that. So
No
yeah,
worries.
I want to reflect now on living abroad. Cool. Try that again. So yeah, now I want to reflect on living abroad and the effect it's had on us, being two Brits. So what's something you've learned about yourself? Would you say from living abroad in China?
That's a good question. I think I have learned that I am more adaptable than I thought. I think growing up in West Lothian, there's something called they used to tell us at school the West Lothian mindset, which is basically imposter syndrome. Anywhere you go, you're like, should I really be here? Is that something I should really be? Like, should I be at this table? Right? That is a big problem of growing up in a kind of working class area in Scotland. You get imposter syndrome in a big way. And I think coming to China has taught me not to get rid of that voice. I think that voice is unfortunately always there, right? But certainly it's taught me to be a little bit more confident. I think just because I've come to China. I can live in China. I know things about China that people back home don't know. It's made me a more confident person because it's like I can have conversations with people in Chinese. I can survive living in this foreign country that is very different from my own. I can travel about on my own in this country. Not everyone can do that. Yeah, why not? Why shouldn't I speak about those experiences? So yeah, so I think it's made me a more confident person. It's made me realize I maybe have more skills than I gave myself credit for. I hope. And it's given me, I don't know, because there are so many new experiences you encounter all the time in China, right? And people are always inviting you to places because they want to learn about your culture. There's more opportunities, I guess, to try new things than I ever found in the UK. And maybe those opportunities do exist in the UK, and I just never felt confident enough to search them out. Um, I hope that's the case, right? I hope it was just me and it's not that they just don't
Mm.
exist. But like living in a foreign country has definitely made me someone who's more happy to reach out to people like Jing Jing and say, "Hey, I want to write. You're looking for someone to write. Do you want to read my stuff?" Because it's kind of taught me that the worst thing that can possibly happen is for that person to say no. And a lot of the time, they say yes. They're happy to hear from you, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's totally been my experience so far. I've been really quite shocked how many people are saying yes to being on a podcast with someone who has not many foreign followers. I do find, yeah, it's nice entering a creative space. I find people are quite generally supportive. But I want to
Hmm.
kind of go back to that point you made about having imposter syndrome. I think growing up in the UK, we are taught to, keep your head down. There are lots of places growing up in the UK where you're made to feel like you don't belong. Yeah, that I'm currently going through a period of therapy right now, and this is the point I'm reflecting on throughout that. Yeah, because like growing up, I find myself thinking like negative thoughts. What's this guy, traveling the world? Who does he think he is? And I think that's related to kind of growing up in the UK. You do kind of think, know your place. Even I'm quite guilty of that sometimes, where I really don't want to be or mean to be. But yeah, it's definitely affected my. It's kind of be like a limiting belief. I've lived in lots of different countries, but I never thought I've always had hesitancy to enter a space. Even in Shanghai, it's like one of the most wealthiest cities in the world. You're in like a really cool bar, but you're around people who noticeably have a lot more money than you. Um, yeah, I find myself hesitant at times to like reach out and say hello. I wonder if you've had feelings like that.
100%. Yeah, because I think it's often like, to me, I think in the UK, if you go to a quote unquote good school, if you go to Oxford and Cambridge, They're not actually better at teaching you than the other universities in the UK, but what they do give you is the license to be confident, right? When you meet someone from one of these schools, they're always very confident. Often misplaced
Mm,
confidence, but they're very confident. Whereas, yeah, you're right. The rest of the UK, there's very much a, well, what are you doing here? Right? There's a subconscious everywhere you're going. You're like, oh, should I really be here? Is that something I should be? Like, you're very conscious of your status, of your own abilities. You're always talking yourself down,
mm,
right? Like to the point where in the UK, it's kind of considered rude to talk yourself up. Why is that? Why is it rude to go, oh, I'm actually good at my job, right? For the longest time, I felt really embarrassed about saying I'm good at teaching. I am good at teaching. I know I'm good at teaching. I've got the reviews from my students to prove it. But for a long, long time, I felt really uncomfortable about saying it. And I think it's that attitude in Britain. It's sometimes like, who are you to say that you're good? Even if you're good at it, you shouldn't say it, right? That's not something you should say. So yeah, I
mm.
100% agree with you. It's this like imposter syndrome, and I do think it comes from this attitude of growing up in certain areas in the UK where you're kind of like almost taught it from your earliest days, right? Be careful of what you say and where you go. Be careful of
Mm.
like overstepping your mark. Keep your head down. Yeah. So I think that's why I think moving abroad is so relieving for so many British people because you can kind of almost have an excuse to put that aside and live on your own terms.
Yeah, 100% totally agree with everything you just said. Yeah, I'd like to share this. Maybe the listeners will get something out of this, but there's this quote online. I think it's Alex Hormozy. He says something like, the best way to build confidence is to have an undeniable stack of evidence to show that you are who you say you are. So, for example, yeah, when I first started teaching, I had very little confidence. But the best thing about teaching is the more you do it, the more stuff you can point to that works. So, yeah, obviously, I've got years of experience teaching. I've got my PGC, QTS, masters, do my MPQs. I've taught all ages. My kids' results are higher than they were before I came in. I have messages from parents. So, there's lots of stuff I can point to that I can tell myself, okay, this I know I'm a good teacher because I got all this. Yeah, it's kind of my attitude with the podcast too. Okay, I'm someone who reaches out, connects, learns from people, and I have a podcast to show it. Uh, yeah, I found thinking through that lens has really helped me develop my own confidence coming from the UK, where you're kind of like cut down a little bit, depending on your, the family you come from, the wealth background, even just your skin color. So yeah, that's something I just wanted to share. Yeah, let's think about Scotland. What do you miss most about Scotland, if anything?
Well, I miss quite a lot about Scotland. Like, I really love actually Scotland. I definitely don't miss the weather. That's one thing. But I think I always say the thing I actually miss most about not just Scotland but the UK is the pub. I think the pub is a unique British institution that I've found the equivalent of nowhere else. Like, it's not a bar, right? The pub is different from a bar, and there is something nice about the British pub, right? Going into the British pub, there's a feeling of community. It just feels different from any other kind of place you can buy alcohol that I've ever been to. And when I'm homesick, I'm often most homesick for just like you know how homesick will sometimes take you and it'll give you like a sense memory almost. The thing that I get homesick for the most is I'll have this thought of when it's warm, I'm like, I would love to go to a good beer garden in the UK. That would be great. When it's cold, I can like almost sense going to a pub and sitting beside the fire with your pint of whatever, Belhaven Best or something like that. So I think the thing that always comes back to me is I really, really miss the pub. I would love to be able to just go to a pub. And they do have a British pub in Beijing, but it's just not the same. It's just there's something quite not quite. They don't quite get it.
Yeah, there's a few Irish bars around in cities in
Yeah,
China too.
yeah,
Yeah, I just find the clientele is never, not disrespect to the clientele. I mean, it's just never the same vibe or energy that you would get back home.
yeah. No, you're 100% like
Uh,
because there's
but
something
yeah,
because it's social, right? The pub is social in a way that most bars don't seem to be. Um, like I guess clubs are also social in a way, but more in a kind of like mating way. Like you're like, oh, that guy's hot. Maybe I'll go and talk to him. The pub, you just talk to someone because the old guy sitting in the stool next to you is there. It's like an excuse almost to be social. There's something nice about it that I've just not found
yeah,
replicated anywhere else.
yeah. I suppose in Chinese culture, it's more about just sitting at the table with your friends more than mingling, meeting people.
I guess I guess the Chua place in China, maybe if you went to get Chua, you could maybe recreate it. People are more chatty there, I think. Like you're sitting outside on a warm day, especially in the
Yeah,
south, and you're eating your beef, your barbecued beef. People will chat to you.
yeah. I like. There's a street in Shanghai. You can sit outside and drink beer. That's how I normally make friends. But
Right.
yeah, my next question is obviously it seems we're both really happy living in China. But yeah, but living abroad is never all sunshine and rainbows. I'm really curious. Have you ever seriously thought about leaving China? Have you ever had a moment you think, okay, maybe I need to
Sorry, you
consider
broke out
my
a little
place
bit
here?
there.
Oh, sorry, I'll repeat it again. We both seem really happy living in China. But of course, when we live abroad, nothing is ever smooth sailing. So I'm really curious, have you ever seriously thought about leaving China? Have you ever had a moment where you thought, okay, I need to reevaluate my place here?
Yeah, so I would say that to go back to one of your earlier questions, one of the big challenges we have as a international couple is um, in China, they obviously don't have same-sex marriage, and in Britain, the environment for bringing a foreign spouse to Britain is quite hostile at the moment. Not just because there's a big influx of anti-immigration feeling, but also like the legal system just is it's very difficult if you come from a working class background to be able to get a spouse there. And so one of the things we sometimes talk about, I think the only reason we would probably leave China, me and my husband, is if we wanted to start a family. Um, because like living in China as a gay couple is perfectly fine. There's no problems with it. Like I've never really encountered any problems with being a married couple. Most people will just accept it. But when it comes to big legal decisions, um, the biggest one being if you wanted to adopt a kid, it's impossible. You wouldn't be able to do it. Every now and again, we think about if we wanted to start a family, we would probably have to move. But then our problem becomes where do we move to? Because the UK, as I've said, is just quite hostile just now to immigration. It's quite difficult to get a spousal visa just now in the UK. You need to earn, I think, £38,000, I think it is, to be able to sponsor your spouse. And the chances of me getting a job that pays £38,000, it's not impossible, but it certainly adds an extra level of stress, right? So yeah, so I think that's the big thing. But again, it leads to problems because we're not really sure where we would.
Yeah, yeah, that 38,000 figure shocked me when I first heard it because I can't imagine ever earning that myself in the UK.
Yeah.
There's literally no path to myself earning that.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, that's if I ever get married, I'd have to explain that. I would have to explain that to my future partner that there's realistically no chance I can actually bring you to the UK, um, which is quite a strange
Yeah,
thought.
and the
Um,
application for like even like a tourist visa to visit is sometimes kind of hostile because they're aware that we're married. So sometimes British immigration will be um like there's a lot of weird questions about like, are you going to overstay your visa? Is this a way to stay illegally? And you're like, no, I just want to visit my family with my husband. But for some reason, like I have a friend actually who lives in London who is married to a British woman. He is an American, and he has this line where he's like, he's convinced that the entire British immigration system is set up as a con, so that you have to find an immigration lawyer to be able to stay in the country. Like it's just a con to keep immigration lawyers in jobs because he's like, that's how it feels. It's so hostile. It's such a laborious process. There's so many bits of paper you have to fill out. So yeah, it's not a good situation at all.
do you know the YouTuber Evan Erdinger? I think his name is. He's an
Uh,
American living in the
no, I don't
UK.
think so.
No, he
No, I don't
he
know.
made this video that he made this video that breaks down how much he has to pay to keep renewing his visa, and it is just
Uh,
shocking. I'm really surprised it's been even allowed to get even close to that kind of level. The amount of nonsense they have to jump through, and they keep getting charged for it, extortionate fees for every little stage. Because there's no one in Parliament who's there to represent the issues or that immigrants and expats face in the UK. So they're basically just constantly exploited, which is yeah. If I don't recommend moving to the UK, anyone. There are people who do it and have a wonderful time, but I think it's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough system, right? And as you say, it's like I don't know what because like expats can vote now, right? So you can vote for lifetime voting, which is a new thing. So maybe it'll change. I don't know. Maybe now that we can vote in UK elections forever, maybe we'll find an MP somewhere who wants to tap into that. I don't know. I think what it would need though is like France has expat MPs, right? Like French people living in China are represented by an MP who represents Asia. And I think that's probably what we need in the UK if we ever want to fix it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I'm going to move on towards the end of the interview. Um, yeah, we'll talk about the idea of home. Home is a complicated word for expats and people who live abroad. So when you think about that word today, home, what or where does home mean to you?
Honestly, I think at this point in my life, when I think of home, I think of my Beijing, honestly. Because when I go back to, I think specifically because of the COVID-19 pandemic actually changed this emotionally for me. Because I was thinking about this actually in preparation for this podcast, that in the last 6 years, I think I've spent a grand total of 4 weeks in the UK. Like just 4 weeks. And most of that was because during COVID, it wasn't very easy to leave China, and it wasn't, and the UK wasn't a particularly inviting place during COVID, right? So like throughout the pandemic, I just didn't visit, and then I went back, and I'm only ever there for a week or two when I go and visit. And yeah, so when I go back to the UK, it feels strange. I almost get like reverse culture shock when I go back because, like, I say this to my Chinese friends actually when they ask me, "Oh, in the UK, how much is eggs? How much is beer?" I'm like, I honestly couldn't tell you. I've not lived there in years now, and I don't go back very often. I just don't have that good of a sense of what life is like in the UK. I probably have a better sense than most Chinese people because I talk to friends and family. Um, but I feel like I have a much better sense of what life is like in China and what life is like in Beijing than I have what is in the UK. And so I've started kind of thinking of Beijing as home. This is the place I return to again and again and again. It's the place I feel most comfortable. So yeah, so I think it's probably Beijing.
One thing I want to ask you is because we're both from small villages and towns in the UK. Have you ever wondered, like, obviously you meet British people in China or abroad elsewhere. I find there is a difference if you come from a very small, remote area in the UK, and
Mm.
if you're from where your family's from a big city. I'm a big Liverpool fan. I have lots of friends who are Scousers, and I find they're a lot more connected to their identity. Just living in a big city, you have access to more convenience and more opportunities. You have more connections. Um, so yeah, for me, when I think of home, I don't think of uh, the South Wales valleys. I'm not really sure what I think of. But I'm wondering if that's something you've thought about. If you compared your upbringing to people who lived in big cities in the UK.
Yeah, so I've honestly never thought of it before, but yeah, I think you might be right. Like quickly running through my mind of British people I know who are from big cities. Yeah, I guess they do feel a bit more of a connection. That's odd. Yeah, that's a good point. I've never thought of it, but I think you might be correct. I wonder why that is. Maybe it is the connection, the kind of sense of hometown
Yeah,
pride that
because
just doesn't exist in smaller towns in Britain, I guess.
I've also you see people who kind of take a break who just want to go home for a bit, spend more time with the family. I think that's so much easier to do if your family's in a big city where you have access to employment. For me, going back home, I'd be living in my mother's bedroom with a bus close by which is like an hour and a half away from Cardiff. That's obviously grossly extortionate. There was literally nothing for me to do in my small village. So yeah, I feel like that's a barrier that stops me going home as much and connecting and developing the relationships further over time. So, Douglas, we've reached the end of the show. At the end of the show, I like to ask everyone two questions that I think are quite fun. And the first one I want to ask is if you could recommend one place for our listeners around the world to visit, where would it be?
Um, I think everyone should go to Changsha, which is the capital of Hunan, because so my husband is from Hunan. I think Hunan is a great place to visit, and I don't think enough foreign tourists go to Changsha. It's famous for its stinky tofu. There is a street in Changsha that smells of tofu. It's great, and it's just such a chill vibe. Like I love Changsha. It's my favorite city in China. I would go there in a heartbeat. If I was to move out of Beijing, it probably would be to Changsha. And yeah, I just love it down there. It's just like so chill. So I always recommend people go to Changsha. It's a place most foreigners don't go, and it's amazing. You'll get a real sense of traditional Chinese culture down there.
Yeah, cool. I've been there myself 10 years ago. I smelt the sticky tofu street. I think it's also the
Yeah.
birthplace of Mao Zedong, if I'm correct.
So he
Yeah,
he
which is
wasn't born there.
really
He was born in
interesting.
a town outside Changsha, but they do
Uh,
have a giant bust of him, like a huge statue of
yeah,
young
that's
Mao
something.
Zedong on the riverfront. which is it's a vibe.
Yeah, yeah, it's worth a look. And the final question, if you could go back in time and talk to the younger version of yourself right before you left Scotland, you're about to step on the plane to China, what would you say to young Douglas?
I think the number one thing I would say to younger me is stop worrying so much. I think that is a big change that has come about in my life where I feel like I spent a lot of my youth worrying about what I was meant to be doing. And I have become a big proponent of the idea that just listen out for what your heart is telling you, go do it, and things work out most of the time. You usually end up pretty happy. Stop worrying about the things you could have done and just go out and do stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a quote from Family Guy, of all places, where if you live your life not worrying about the consequences, then everything will work out okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's truth to that, right? Like
Yeah,
I spend a lot of time as a younger person being like, should I be doing that? Should I go there? What if I miss out? Blah blah blah. Now I'm kind of like, well, life has a way of fixing itself out. Don't worry too much.
yeah, yeah. There's always places to fall back on. So, yeah, thank you very much for coming today, Douglas. I really appreciate this chat. Yeah, this has been therapeutic, I think, as two British people reflecting on life in China. So, for our listeners who've enjoyed our chat and they want to follow you online, where can they find you?
So on Twitter and on Blue Sky, if anyone's still using Blue Sky, I am Doug_Rooney. You can also find my channel on YouTube at Sino0, Sino0, where I post stuff there. Actually, my last video was an interview I had with my husband talking about his life growing up in rural Hunan as a racial minority. So if you've enjoyed or my talk about our relationship has piqued your interest, you can go and learn more about him over there.
Yeah, I've not checked that one out yet, but I definitely will. I'll be quite interested. Yeah, Douglas, I appreciate
Yeah, I
you, man.
think he has an
Thank you so
interesting
much.
side.
If I'm ever in
No,
Beijing,
thank you for having me
I'll.
on.
You're welcome. If I'm ever in Beijing, I'll hit you up. If you're ever in the area of Shanghai or Ningbo, I hope you do the same. Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
so much.
definitely.
Take care, buddy.
No, thank you very much.
Stop recording.